Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. I'm sorry we're getting started a little bit late today, but we unfortunately had some internet connection problems. So thank you very much for your patience, and we're going to hop right into the presentation. So the title of today's session is How to Write a Successful Case Study. And if I can have the next slide, please, Nadine. I'm going to kick off with just a few housekeeping notes. So first off, you have a control panel on the right-hand side of your screen that will allow you to make a couple of selections. You can select your audio option on your computer or your phone per your preference. Your microphone will be muted for the duration of this session. However, we do have a Q&A box and a chat box that you can use to submit questions to our panelists. And the presentation will be recorded and distributed a couple of days after we conclude today. Can I please have the next slide, Nadine? So I'm going to walk us through a brief introduction to Emerald and the Emerging Markets Case Studies collection. I'm then going to hand over to the main presentation on case writing, which will be led by Dr. Virginia Bodolica, the EMCS Editor-in-Chief, and also the Saeed Khoury, Chair of Leadership Studies and the Head of MS&E Department at the American University of Sharjah. And I will also add an award-winning case writer in her own right as well. And then we will finish up with a Q&A with whatever time we have left at the end. Can I have the next slide, please? So to provide you with an introduction to Emerald and EMCS, I wanted to first do an overview of Emerald's activity in the case study space. So we have been working in teaching cases since 2011, and we truly believe in the potential of this format to achieve real-world impact, both through the research that authors conduct with organizations to write their cases, and also in the classroom in their ability to engage and inspire students and instill them with these key skills and competencies. So we have nearly 3,000 case studies in our collection, adding about 200 every year. And we cover the full spectrum of topics in the business and management field, including special topics on hot trends and topics of interest, including gender and diversity, inclusion, environmental studies, and sustainability. Can I have the next slide, please, Nadine? Thank you. Within the Emerald Case Collection is the Emerging Markets Case Studies Collection, which is specifically dedicated to publishing decision-based teaching cases on the unique emerging markets perspective. We also accept the full spectrum of business management disciplines, and cases can be based on primary and/or secondary data. If you are working with primary data, you will need to provide consent, but if you're working with secondary data exclusively, you do not need to obtain that consent form because we are assuming that all the information you're using is already publicly available. Everything we do is based on real situations. We do not publish fictional cases because we think it's important to have those tangible examples for students to work with. So cases must be written about real protagonists in real organizations making real business decisions. We accept compact and traditional length cases, which for us, a compact case is anything below 3,000 words, and a traditional length case can be up to 7,000 words in length. And this is just for the case document. The teaching note can be longer or however long you feel necessary as the author to provide the information required. And of course, everything must be original and unpublished elsewhere. In terms of what we offer to our authors, we are Scopus indexed, which I think speaks towards the quality and the rigor of our editorial process and the associate editors and editors we work with. We are fully double-blind peer-reviewed, so you will receive quality feedback at every stage. And we also offer payments upon publication of your case with competitive acceptance rates and a promise that we will do our best to give you a first decision within 90 days. And if you do leave this session being interested in wanting to submit, I've linked the author guidelines and I'm happy to share these slides afterwards. Can I have the next slide, please? One opportunity I wanted to make sure we shared is the new competition we are running this year called the Africa and Middle East Emerald Case Writing Competition. The goal of this opportunity is to encourage and promote the development of high-quality teaching case materials relevant to the emerging economies in Africa, the Middle East, Turkey, and Pakistan. At the same time, we want to support the authors based in these regions and offer them the opportunity to get some recognition for their contributions. So in order to participate, beyond just adhering to our author guidelines, you have to have that emerging markets focus in the region. You must also be written by authors based at higher education institutions in these same countries, have at least one co-author based at these institutions. If you have a co-author outside of the region, that is okay as long as you've got one on the team. And otherwise follow the same requirements that I mentioned in the other slide. If you are interested in submitting, we have a submission deadline of September 30th later this year. And we also have a prize pool of $2,000 with $1,000 going to the winning case. All cases, they will be considered for publication in the EMCS. So you will still have that opportunity even if you don't win. But please note that the judging process can take up to 2 months' time. So you would receive a decision on the results of the competition around the end of November. Can I have my last slide, please, Nadine? And these are just some resources for writing that I wanted to share as you move on from this session and start working independently on your case studies. Emerald has a large variety of resources available. I urge you to look around our website. I won't linger on this too long, so the one I will call out the most is the Emerald Cases Hub. This is a completely free online platform with modules that will walk you through the writing process from end to end, from setting your learning objectives to conducting research, all the way through to reviewing your case study for submission to make sure you've checked all of those boxes that we require. And we also have a link to my contact information if you ever want to reach out with a question after the session as well. So that is the end of my slides. Nadine, I am actually also going to share Virginia's slides. So let me see.
Can you share them, Melissa, from your side, or would you like that I can share them from my side?
I can do it. I'm just going to swap the presenter over to myself, which should not happen. Okay. Are you able to see that?
Yeah, we can see them.
Perfect. Then Virginia, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, girls. Thank you, everyone. I see we have a very large crowd over there, so thank you for being there. And apologies again for being a bit late. So we are spread all over the world right now. Melissa, I think you're in the US, right? Nadine is in Egypt. I am in Italy right now. So everybody has different types of internet connections, and yes, but we are here, thanks God, and we are going to catch up the few minutes that we were late. So thank you, Melissa, for the introductions. So we are obviously delivering this in particular with the emphasis on this case study competition that we have for Africa and Middle East, just exactly how Melissa explained, all those different guidelines and recommendations for actually submitting the case for this competition in particular. Melissa introduced me. I think the most important thing that I would like to emphasize that I've been in the Middle East for 18 years now. So it's a long history, and it's a lot of knowledge about the region. And second point, which is very relevant and important, that I am the editor-in-chief of the collection of Emerald Emerging Markets Case Studies collection, right? The journal that Melissa rightly pointed out, that is a Scopus indexed journal, which is very important, I know, for people in particular who are researchers, and publishing in Scopus indexed journals, even though this one is a teaching journal, right, which is dedicated to teaching case studies, but still it is very important to know that this is a Scopus index journal, and it gives a lot of credit and recognition to the scholars who are publishing in a journal like that. Good. So my purpose here is going to be to share some tips on how can you write a successful teaching case study. And in particular, my emphasis is always to the fact that we are publishing teaching pedagogical case studies. So those are different than the research-driven qualitative case studies, right? We know those are different traditions. And here we're talking about pedagogy. We're talking about cases that we're using in our classrooms for different levels of education, at the undergraduate level, at the graduate, and even executive education, and even for in-house training purposes, where we can write, develop the cases for the companies, where we then deliver our consulting services, or even we deliver some training to the people from that company. So case studies are really multi-purpose, multifunctional, and they're very versatile. Means it can really achieve different purposes, and not only in the classroom with your students, but also help you as researchers to navigate between what you learn while you collect your data for the teaching case study, to learn what is the evidence in the field, and then you can convert eventually by gathering more data, qualitative data, and then write maybe research-driven case study. Because you will see, as I will explain a little bit later, we still need to link, not only still, but it's a must. We need to link the case study to the phenomena that we have in research, that we have in our investigation, because we link that to some theoretical framework, to some specific models, to some conceptual frameworks that we have, right, to make sure that students can, in our classes, can apply those theoretical concepts into practice through the usage of these case studies, and vice versa, right, depending on whether you're using flipped classroom concept or whether you are lecture driven, and then you're using case study to reinforce the theoretical concepts that you are using in class. So my purpose is to really share those tips on how can we achieve this successful case, and that case that can win in a competition, but maybe not necessarily winning, but you can successfully publish it in a journal like ours. And you can, why it is important to publish, because you can still use your case study without publishing it, but it's important to also create this nice service to other scholars across the world, other instructors, professors who need a case that you developed and need a case about a specific emerging market, and then they lack this, and they can access that knowledge through the platform that we offer, through our journal where your case study is published. Okay, so let's move forward. Let's put all the slide, given that animation now, given that, let's put everything there. Right, so a case study. Why actually it's important to know how to write it? Well, case study, as I said, it's versatile. It achieves a lot of purposes. You can convert it, you can use it for different purposes, as I said, for different type of audiences, and even it can inform your research, right? As investigator, if you're a scholar, and then you have also expectation to publish research-driven articles. So you will see that it's versatile. At the same time, when you want to publish a teaching case study, you have to keep in mind that there are a lot of stakeholders that you have to take into consideration in order to be able to succeed to publish a case. And here we have some parallels, obviously, with when we publish our research, right, as scholars. We have a lot of people being involved in that and a lot of stakeholders. Obviously, we will highlight which are the most important stakeholders when we write a teaching case study. But in general, if, as you see around here, around that circle, we have a lot of stakeholders. Definitely the stakeholders are, and the most important ones are the students, right? Because we students, whether those are executive education students or undergrad or MBA or executive MBA, right? It can be in company, people who are working there and receive this case study as a training, right, exercise. So students, those are very important, and we have to keep them in mind. Of course, we have to keep in mind the professors or instructors, because you are the ones who might write, and you see here the writers of the case study, but eventually you might not use that case, and there is somebody on your team who is going to use that case, and then somebody else across the world who will access the journal where your case is published, and then will use that case in their classroom. So it's important to keep in mind what they need exactly to know about the case to be able to use that case, right? Of course, we, and as Melissa rapidly also mentioned, that we do not publish, and I'll highlight that later, we do not publish fictional case studies. We publish the real one based on real organization, real stories, very topical and very up-to-date events that occur around the world to catch attention, but also to be able to put the students in the shoes of those protagonists that are managing those companies, and to be able to train in students those critical decision-making skills, right? Application skills, different type of skills, creative skills, depending on the emphasis that the case study takes. So protagonists are very important people in this situation, because those are the ones who are going to share the information with you about the situations that are happening in the company or that they lead, or that they manage, or they are working at. Those can be just employees, right? Your protagonist, an employee, simple employee who is going through some specific career problem, right? So it doesn't have to be necessarily a manager, a top manager, or the CEO. So protagonists are very important. Of course, as we said, because we are thinking to submit to a competition, judges, those are the other people, your peers around the world, who are going to read that and who are going to judge according to the criteria and the guidelines in order to decide whether this is a winning case or not, right? And then if you would like to submit, and we certainly hope you're going to submit the case for publication at our journal. So it's very important to keep in mind that we have specific guidelines, and there are reviewers who are experienced people who published before the case studies, and that the case has to comply with specific a certain type of let's say standard, right? Because we would like to keep our standards high, and then at the same time to comply with the guidelines, right? What we have there, what are the key important aspects. So we need to make sure that all those aspects are being respected, and then that they are implemented. And those are obviously the reviewers, the editors, the judges, who make sure that those guidelines are being respected, so that we keep our level high. Let's move forward with the understanding of what a teaching case study necessitates. What does it require? So let's put the animation. Typically for you, and I know sometimes people say, well, it's a little bit challenging because it takes us 2 documents to do. Yes, but I'll share with you the very smart tips, because with the experience you get really the knowledge of how to do that, so you don't lose extra time, while at the same time you are very inclusive and you achieve your purpose. So for you to be able to submit your case for competition or for publishing, obviously, you need 2 types of documents, which are essential documents that you need to submit. Definitely, remember, we said that students are very important stakeholders, but also are the instructors who are actually going to use your case. Because if you develop your case, you might know very well how to use it. What are the questions that you're going to ask on that case? What kind of theoretical frameworks you want to reinforce through the usage of those cases? But other people, other scholars around the world, the teachers, instructors might not know that, and they might necessitate exactly a type of case like yours. So you have to write in a specific separate document all this information to facilitate the usage of your case in the classroom. So the 2 important documents which blend this view of the students on one side and the instructor on the other side are the pedagogical case, or the teaching, mostly we refer to it, teaching case study, and the second one is the teaching note, or sometimes we refer to that instructor's manual, but we mostly call it teaching note. So in the case study, we typically address it to students, so we don't have to write it in a way that all the answers are there, obviously, because we want the students to decide how to act upon a specific problem, dilemma, we refer to it, and I'll highlight it a little bit later. So the case study actually takes care, let's say, of the students to write the case in such a nice, interesting, compelling way, so the students are going to be attracted to read the case, and at the same time to be challenged to address that specific dilemma and then propose some solutions through discussions in the classroom. On the other side, we have the teaching note, and the teaching note takes care of the perspective of the instructor, of the professor who would like to use your case in the teaching in their own classroom. And the teaching note will open up all those specific elements that will make clear how to use your case when to use it, what type of concepts those cases, your case, a specific case is going to highlight, what kind of theories you can link to that specific case, right? So all these is going to be covered in the teaching note. And obviously with this, when you combine this students and the instructor's perspective through those two documents, you'll be able to successfully achieve the purpose of publishing a successful case study. Let's move forward with specific emphasis right now on exactly that. The teaching case study is a teaching case study. It's not a research-driven one. So it's a pedagogical tool, like I said in my preamble a little bit before I started going through the PowerPoint slide. So it is very important to know that this determines what is going to be written in your case study. Think about those who are there in the room, thinking about the research-driven qualitative case study. We will have typical conventional structure in that case study where we'll start with some introduction, then we are going to go through literature review, then sometimes it's going to be the conceptual framework, right? It's a qualitative, it's not hypothesis-driven one. And then we're going to have quotes and all this and linking to the theory, and then towards then the discussion linking the results to the theory with maybe if it's a grounded theory kind of thing, then you'll write that. No. Here, we do not have that. Why? Because it is a pedagogical tool, so it's written in a kind of a story-driven type of style, which will never have a literature review. So that's a very, very confusing thing that happens sometimes when we see through the submissions that we receive. There is this confusion between what is a research and pedagogical case study, right? We do not have a literature review in our pedagogical teaching case studies. For obvious reasons, because that is going to be covered, some aspects, some theories, some models that we want to reinforce through the usage of this case is going to be covered in the teaching note, but not in the case study. Case study, it's like a story which really presents the events and facts in an engaging manner, right? As if it was a story of life, and it tries to write it in such a narrative style that it pushes whoever who reads it to imagine as if that person who reads it is that protagonist, that person having those issues, dilemmas, and problems in a marketplace, in an organization, in a career, depending on what is the purpose of that case study, right? So the fact that it is a teaching pedagogical case study determines what we write in that case study, right? And it's definitely what is important also that it never in its writing style alludes to one right answer. There is no one right answer, and there is actually, who knows what is the right answer? Only life will tell us what exactly happened, because there are a lot of risks and uncertainties. But what you want to take out from the classroom in which you are using your case study is to put the students in that situation where they deliberate, where they talk, where you say maybe this, but maybe that, right? So it opens up to so many possibilities that it pushes them to really think about solutions that are not necessarily even thought about before the case was used in the classroom, right? So that's why it's very important to write it in a way that it doesn't point right to one solution towards them. And it's very important. So one thing I highlighted, that it's not a research-driven qualitative case study. No, it is based on research, on data collection from real companies, real people, the ones who are protagonists in the organization, but it's not written like a research-driven qualitative case study. One thing. And second thing, it's not a case study, which is a pedagogical teaching case study, is not an exercise. What does it mean? You put their formulas, you put their numbers, and then we do calculation, and this is the thing, right? No, it's not that. Otherwise, this is an exercise. The qualitative case study in here, that is a teaching one, necessitates real data. It needs also information in the appendices. There are financial issues and all this. Very good. Students will use that information. Maybe calculations are required. That's good. but the case in itself will not have a question of calculate what is the, let's say, assets of the company or the profit of the company, and that's the result. No, no, no. They might need that information to then start thinking, should we open a new subsidiary there, or maybe in another market, or maybe in partnership, or maybe a loan? So through so many different type of possibilities, right? So that's what is the case all about, right? To use that information that is provided and then to open up the debate and then to start deliberating to say there are several options, but maybe in this scenario this might happen and maybe this is not so good. Maybe for this situation, because those are the conditions with less liquidity, with less possibility or uncertainty in that market, that is going to be the case, right? So that is the real trick of a good, successful case study. Let's move forward to see what else do we have. So let's move to next slide, please. Okay, so we put here, and here's on purpose that I'm putting this question, because I would like you to put yourself in the shoes of the people who would then read the case, or even the students, right? And by looking through those questions, you can already understand what makes a case a successful case, to be a success, right? So a question, what do you think if you were to read, if you are a student and you are going, maybe some of you are students there and in the room, right? And you're thinking, what kind of, if you were to take, let's say, a training session, or if you're a student in your MBA, what kind of case would you prefer more to be able to kind of practice the issues that might eventually occur one day if you were to be a manager, if you were to be an employee in the company, right? So which are the ones that are preferred, which are dilemma-based or just success story? A case which writes, well, this company succeeded because this is this, and basically describes the story. Or it's dilemma-based. There is an intriguing situation going on and it's open-ended. You don't know how, what to do, what happened in reality, and you have to actually act upon that specific dilemma. Typically, it's dilemma-driven. That's what is an interesting thing to resolve, because otherwise, if I read, oh, that's successful, that's good, okay, you can learn from success stories, of course, right? But that's it. Did you practice really? Did you think exactly what to do? No, actually the success is already given away to you. But the key purpose of a teaching case study is actually to practice, to think about what might happen and to propose some solutions before actually knowing eventually, because many cases are up to date. So even the ones, the people who are writing, the writers, the professors who write the case studies might not know what happened in reality, because the issues are very topical and they're still ongoing, right? So we don't know exactly what were the choices that managers made. So dilemma-based cases are more preferred than rather just success stories, which ask for action and decision or not. Yes, decision ones, because we would like to see how students would practice on those specific dilemmas and issues that are described in the case, which are based on fieldwork or publicly available sources. Well, what's the difference? If we have newspapers, news everywhere, we can read. Those are publicly available sources. Ideally, what we'd like to bring to the table is really that extra additional work that the researcher does to collect data that not everybody can have access to, right? Through interviews with protagonists, with companies, and this which makes the case very rich. On recent events or past events. Look, I know that there are divisions and people say, well, Harvard Business School still, many professors are using cases from 1980s and all this. Right, we can learn from issues of the past, but look what is going on in the world right now. So many things going on which are not relevant at all to what happened 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20, and even 10, and even 5 years ago. You see the trend towards, obviously, AI right now. So it's everything about this technological boom, and particularly with this virtual reality, artificial intelligence, right? And of course, with the dilemma of sustainability and this mental health, there are so many issues which are there around, and these are completely different from what was the topical issue 30, 40 years ago, right? So obviously, recent events, and even when you submit your case, we would like to see that things that happened there, right, in the case, it's 1, maximum 2 years old, right? Because it loses its interest. Because if you are writing about real companies, people can already know the answer, because 2 years later it's already clear what the company has done, what kind of decision the managers took in there, right? So ideally, and remember that still the process of reviewing will take some time. So by the time it's published, it's already going to be 6 months old, right? So it's very important to write about very topical issue, not to delay. If you are gathering your data, don't delay writing 5 months later, because by the time you write, it will take several months too, and then you submit in the process, and then this and that, it takes time. So as you collect data, sit and write, and then right away submit. Right? That's very important. Obviously, try to practice it in the classroom, and that's exactly as you are writing it. That is a key also success element for a successful case study. So recent events, yes. Which report on data or narrate? Reporting on data is just a report. It's not really interesting. It's not captivating. It's not capturing the attention. Narrative style is very interesting. So that is a little bit difficult to achieve, but with experience you can get that. So the case flows, the case involves, it's like wraps you around and just gets you inside, and you're so intrigued to know what happened, right? And to just put yourself, you are kind of living. Is when you are reading a book, you are living that life of that protagonist. The same here, and that's what the case study is actually all about, and that's why the style of writing is different, rather than the style of writing of research articles, which are very conventional, have to use very professional scholarly language, right? We don't use synonyms there. It has to be, if you have your concept, it's going to be always use the same word, right? Here we have this leeway and then flexibility to use synonyms and all this to make this life, because the life is like that, reality, right? Using different style of writing in order to captivate the audience. Which are stories or histories, right? Obviously stories. History, again, it reports on data and when it happened, and it's a little bit more dry. Next slide, please. So we have what? Which are topical or focused on important issues or not really? Of course, topical, buzz things which are fresh, recent. It's more interesting, it's more captivating. Provide sufficient information or not? Typically, we try to write a case in a way that the information is there in the appendices in the course, so the students don't lose time to go and search for additional information, and even the results that they'll get from this search can be different, so that the discussion is not going to be at the same level. Yes, there are some cases which are multimedia cases, right? And it can be just the background they described, and then the instructor's note or teaching note can say, okay, student necessitate to go and search a little bit more or learn more about that country where the company is going or intending to go. But it needs to give very clear instructions so that students, through their additional search, get more or less the same type of information, so that the discussion in the classroom is also done from the same level and same let's say amount of information that they get. On identifiable companies or not? Of course, on companies which are real, companies that we can identify with, companies that we know, right? So that it's clear that it's real and it's going on right now. On topics which are related to the course material or not? Of course, that's how we embed the case in our course, because it's supposed to cover something, right? It's supposed to teach students something, for them to get out of that something practical and hands-on. Which describe or duplicate in formats quote. You see here, it's very important to know that you have to keep a balance. It's interesting to have some quotes, but not way too much. And I've seen cases like that basically the entire case is just quotes and dialogue. It can, but you need to also supplement that with some style of narration. Challenging cases or not? Challenging. It's interesting to have some dilemma, some provocative situation that happens, or some issue that the protagonist is going through, so that we can address that. So here already you have some tips on that, right? On what would be a successful case study. Let's move forward. And here are more kind of guidelines about the case. I like to say that a successful case study always captures, here I put 5, and the 6th one is actually let's say in the field of reviewers and associate editor and the editor-in-chief, which is covering the 6 P You'll see here on the screen that all the 5 issues here are starting with a P. So it's actually forced type of structure. Why? Because I would like you to remember that any successful case study has to capture the 5 plus 1 P. So 5P, I always say 6P. I didn't put the 6th one because it's more the responsibility of the, as I said, editorial team, but I'll mention that orally later on. So if you would like to write a successful case study, what does it mean successful? The one which has high chances to win a competition, but the one who will be published in our journal or other case study, pedagogical case study journals. This case study has to successfully tackle the 5 Ps. The first P is problem. So as I mentioned before, every single case has to have a dilemma, has to have a problem, has to have an issue, a challenge, something that needs to be solved. Otherwise, it's not interesting. Otherwise, it's not really relevant. Otherwise, it's not going to encourage any discussion in the classroom. So that P is about the problem. Issue, managerial, employee-driven, societal, depends on what is the emphasis of your case, but there should be a dilemma. And this dilemma will start the case from the very beginning. And with this dilemma, we're going to conclude the case. So I'll show you that structure a little bit later of the case study. So dilemma should be there. We capture it through the word problem, right? So that it starts with a P. Protagonist. Protagonist, you have to, as you read the case, you have to hear the voice of the key actors. So typically it's one protagonist, right? And others are the actors who are kind of leading or supporting the protagonist issue, because you cannot write the story only from the perspective of one. So there are going to be other actors there in between, some other people in the organization, some dilemmas and challenges happening between people, but there is a protagonist who is there, and you feel, and that's the key thing, that the students will take the shoes of those protagonists to make specific decisions. So protagonists, and that's where we're going to hear the voice through some quotes, through some, let's say, description of situation that the protagonist went through. Pieces, sometimes I also refer to it as plots or pieces. So basically it's the narration, that's the way how you write, that's the engaging style, because sometimes we also see cases like that. They're kind of good, they haven't this and this and that, but there is not this style, the sections are kind of detached from it, there is no flow between different sections, parts of the case study, right? So it's a little bit too dry, I mean, it's not engaging. That's where we say there should be a nice way of writing it, engaging way, so that whoever is reading the case flows through different parts of the case study. Possibilities, remember I mentioned you, a case is not a exercise. It's not supposed to be written in a way that it says that is going to be only one good solution. There is no one, we know that, it's an old story already, and it shouldn't be written in a way that it kind of points the reader, the writer wanted to say that this is the right solution. No, on the contrary, even sometimes the case can be written sometimes this, sometimes that, and you describe in an intriguing way the dilemmas that go through the head of the protagonist, and the protagonist think maybe this would be a good solution. Oh, but sometimes under this, he was or she was thinking this solution, and then this. So you can write even several things that protagonist was thinking about. So there is no bad about that. There are some cases which offer those different 3, 4, 5 different type of options. That's okay. Or sometimes you write it in a way that students will come up with those different options. So a successful case should be written in a way that it kind of leaves it open, and it never points to one possibility, but to a multitude of possibilities. And then paradigm, remember that a case study is there to teach students something, for them to take out, to achieve some learning objectives. And for that, paradigms refer to theoretical paradigms, meaning that keep in mind when you write your case study what kind of theory you have behind, right? What kind of theoretical model, what kind of specific conceptual framework you want to reinforce. And that is going to be written in the teaching note, right? The paradigm. And remember the last P that I said I'm going to mention, it's about us, the editorial team. I always say this is the 6P, the P of potential. If your case has potential, even if it's a little bit rough at the beginning. So it is our role, and we are trying, and I think we take pride on that in Emerald Emerging Markets Case Study Collection, that we try to be very constructive, developmental, and that's why my advice always to, if you submit to the journal, please, we might be really at the beginning giving you a lot of feedback, because we believe with the willingness of the writer, any case can be transformed a good one, but it takes two to tango. It means that, and this is my key advice, please be open to reviewers' comments, and please engage with the reviewers' comments. They, particularly our associate editors, they give very specific, detailed comments saying, look, this. There might be maybe 1, 2 elements, 3 there that are pointed out that are not possible from your side. You need to engage in your response letter to say, this is not possible because this, but we address this, we change this, in response to reviewer comments, because those are experienced people who published before, and they know what it takes for the case to be successful. If there is something that is not making really very much sense, because you know your data, you know from it, please respond. Please write that in your response letter and say why this is not really appropriate because of this and this, but you need to clarify that. Let's move forward. In here, I'm mindful of time, but you will see that those are very technical things, and Melissa covered, so that's why I have a few things there left, and then the others I'll go through them very quickly, because those are very like specific elements for guidelines that you can find online, because we have, as Melissa mentioned, we have a lot on the hub, which describes all the requirements for you to submit. So the structure, typical structure of the case which is successful one. Remember, I said you have that problem, that dilemma, and typically we start the case with that problem and dilemma, right? And that is the key focus, the critical issue in decision. Your case should start right away with the problem. So you have one, we call it 1 or 2. But typically 1 opening paragraph. So you don't start the case with introduction. No, there is no introduction. This is not a qualitative research case study. This is a pedagogical case study. So you start right away without any heading title with 1, 2 paragraphs where you put right away, and we always say in this opening 1, 2 paragraphs, you have to have the protagonist, the name, the location where the action happens, right? Location, country, this, the date, when it's that date, right? As I said, it should be recent and fresh, right? And then it should be the name, and it should be the company and the role of that person, protagonist in the company. So that should appear in the first 2 paragraphs where you have your dilemma. And this described, it was a sunny day, morning, and all this. There were a lot of things going on through the head of Michael Smith, CEO of this company. And this, he was overlooking the skyline of, I don't know, Rome in Italy, right? So you have these key things, and on the date, and you put the date, sunny day of July 2020, okay, June 2024, right? So all this right away, and then he was so concerned because he received the financial results, and this, oh, the partner gave up and is not there, so he was really, he had to make a decision right now, right? All this in 2 paragraphs, the students read and they say, okay, a lot of things going on, but why it happened? Then the case goes, and then you start, after this you start with different sections, and you start naming those sections, and you give throughout, through your narrative style, throughout the case length, you'll give and information about the company and about the industry if it's relevant, and the kind of context of the decision making, and a lot of information that you can put in tables and charts, right? And why did I say that the P here, and if you see on the screen, it's going to be the P of the problem that I just mentioned before. Let's move forward. So at the end, you see here that we have the focus. Yeah, the last I wanted to say, at the end of the case, you'll come up again with the problem, right? So it's going to be that closing the loop at the end through the description, and you come up again with this emphasis on your problem, on your key focus, or in other words, dilemma, as we say, right? So here, those elements, I'll not spend time because you have this. I just wanted to highlight, the elements that we have this on the hub, on the website. So it's really clear. It gives you very clear guidelines about, how to do that, how to write, how the case study has to be. And exactly what I said orally, you see this on the screen, and you can find also on the guidelines on the website, right? And it's about the perspectives of protagonists. It's about not writing it like a history, but writing it as like a story, right? But at the same time, to support this with information that you extract from your qualitative research with the interviews with protagonists, but also you're going to have secondary data. And this is always the case, particularly when you give information about the industry, about the country, if it's relevant, if it's international business type of case. All this information is relevant, right? And you will supplement all this information in your case study so that you bring the students, the people who are reading your case up to that level to be able to answer your questions that you'll ask on the case. Let's move forward. So after that, remember, and yeah, click once more. We have one more, like that. Good. So about the teaching note. In the teaching note, what do we have? Remember I told you teaching note is about the perspective of the instructor. And the instructor is anyone who would like to use your case in the classroom will go to the teaching note and will read all the important information. What kind of objectives, learning objectives this case study will help students to achieve. And then what kind of animation questions or discussion questions you put in, you ask students. And then what are specific answers. And then what are theories that you would like to reinforce through this and that. So basically teaching note will have and I would say very conventional structure, right? Conventional, because, and it even goes in that order. So in teaching note, you are not very creative. In what sense? Here's really a little bit like a research-driven article, which has a conventional structure. And typical conventional structure is here. And it's exactly in that order. You have the case synopsis. So it describes the entire case in this one paragraph, longer paragraph, which is the synopsis. Then we go target audience, to whom we address this case, what type of students, what level, when to be used, in specific type, after specific something, this and that, right? So it's very important. Okay, sorry, I was distracted because I've seen on the screen that I have internet connection. I hope everything continues well. The synopsis, target audience, learning objectives, like we will see, Melissa said, we have compact cases. For compact cases, we typically have 1 to maximum 2 learning objectives. In the traditional longer case studies, up to 7,000 words, as Melissa said, only the case without any appendices, without any additional things that we can put in annexes. So there we can have from 4 to 5, up to 5 learning objectives that we would like to achieve with the case, because it's a longer case and there are several elements that you can cover in that case. Then methods of data collection and analysis. So you have to say how you collected the data. You have to demonstrate that this is a real case study based on real things. Detailed teaching plan. So how we are going to animate the discussion in class. Theories, conceptual framework to be reinforced. Suggested reading for case usage. So what kind of readings, chapters from the book, additional articles that students have to read before to prepare for this case study. A list of discussion questions should be there. And then sample answers, sample answers to each of those discussion questions. And then if you know, the epilogue. Epilogue means it describes if you know what happened in reality. So it's very interesting always for them. For the students to know what happened in reality. This is the dilemma, but how their protagonists really acted in real life. It's interesting to write that in epilogue, right? So, but that if you know, obviously. And the hint here, when I said, if you're in doubt what to write in the teaching note, well, you shouldn't, because there are resources available online, because there is this webinar where it exactly tells you the structure. There is no way to miss any section, because this is, clear, specified. But also a tip is, if you were to use a case study of somebody else, what would you like to have as information to be able to successfully use a case that you didn't write yourself? And that's a very nice tip, right? To not to forget to write the important parts in the teaching note. Let's move hand with additional few elements of success. Again, here, I just said this you can find on the website, and then that's why I put it here just for you to know how much information, how much detail you can find about that on the website. But the teaching note typically, and I'll just give you sometimes, and don't get scared, but because it is so detailed and clear, and because of the detailed answers to the sample questions, we typically see that if the case has 10 pages, it's common for the teaching note to be up to double the size of the case. So it's easy 15 to 20 pages, right? So you will see that. So if your case is 10 pages long, so the teaching note will be easy 15 pages at least, if not almost double the size. So that will tell you, but definitely never shorter than the teaching case itself. It means that you didn't sufficiently develop the answers to the questions, or maybe you missed some parts. So there is no way for it, and we see those mistakes sometimes. A case study of 10, 15 pages, and then a teaching note of 3-4 pages. This is obviously impossible, right? Or the case should be a compact case and should be reduced, or definitely the teaching note doesn't address the elements that it should address. Let's move forward. A few elements here about the teaching note. Fundamental, another issue that we commonly see and which doesn't really allow the writers to achieve exactly that level of success for a case study is because the learning objectives are not formulated appropriately. Know that the more advanced your audience is, the more sophisticated your CLOs, or course learning outcomes, and these learning objectives for the case have to be. So here you have to use Bloom's taxonomy. And we always say, my common feedback says, please change the verbs, because verbs are not measurable. Very common mistake for the writers is to write the word, I would like to, at the end of the case study, students should be able to understand. How do you measure understanding? That's the whole thing. So as you say, classify, identify, those are measurable, list, summarize, recognize. And here you have the Bloom's taxonomy. It's available anywhere on the internet. It's in the free. Here you have in the slide. So just select the right verbs, which are measurable verbs, so that you'll be able to link to the nature of the questions. The more sophisticated your audience is, like MBA students, executive education, your learning objectives should use the verbs which are more sophisticated, the higher cognitive level and the higher in the knowledge dimension level too. So create, reflect, design, those are more sophisticated. You would not ask list, summarize, recognize to students in executive education on a master level, right? Because this is too basic. You're not gonna do a case study for this sophisticated audience by asking them to list, summarize, classify, right? So that's the way we also see that there is a disconnect between the learning objectives and the audience, right, to whom you address the case study, right? So you see, this is very important, and I believe I also use that as a case writer myself. I also use this, and sometimes I'm okay, I would like more sophisticated for this type of audience, for executive education. So what is that creative things, debate type of things? So that is debate, it's another verb, and you can see that there are a lot of those verbs that you can, as an instructor, measure to see how successful those students in your class are in achieving those learning objectives, right? So please use Bloom's taxonomy. Every time when we give you feedback, Bloom's taxonomy, that's what we mean. We're exactly using the verbs which are measurable, that you can then, as an instructor, successfully see whether your students achieve that or not. Okay, let's move forward. So that's very important element I wanted to highlight. Major criteria, again, they are on the website. I would not go through them more and more because I would like to give you some tips which are here towards the end of my presentation. But definitely you will see that if you go through all those structural elements of the teaching note, as I said, going through synopsis and then the target audience and then saying what kind of theories and then saying the method, all this that I said, you'll tick the boxes for everything. You'll not leave anything aside, and you'll make sure that there is a connect. Sometimes I see situations when you have questions in the teaching note which have nothing to do with the case study, and then there is a lot of bunch of information in the case study that students don't use to answer their questions. So why did you write all this? To make this case long? No. So your questions need to be related to the case and which are using the case information to provide answers to that, and not the other way around, or not writing a case and then the questions which have nothing to do, and the information from the case is just there but it's never used in the answering of the questions. No, even the appendices, when you provide appendices, all this, why do you put all this information if students never use those this information from the appendices to answer the questions that you wrote and you asked, right? So that's when we say there is disconnect between the teaching note and the case study. And I've seen situations like that, or questions like theoretical questions. Okay, can you list the different steps of the strategic management process? I can read a book about that, right? So ask your questions on the case right away. That's why you wrote the case, because otherwise all the theoretical questions we can answer by just going and reading the book. Let's move forward. Okay, so common mistakes, and that's the ones that typically we also see on the guidelines and all this. If you see in my slide here, it's something that I already said orally. Sometimes there is not enough information that would support what is written in the case. Sometimes the teaching note is too superficial, as I told you too, that it's 2-3 pages. Sometimes it's quite often we receive cases which are research qualitative case studies and not teaching case studies. Obviously, we right away reject those or unsubmit them and say, look, we are not the right target for your article because this is not a case study. Sometimes, for instance, there are too many objectives for what the case can actually cover. Too many, 5, 6, 7 learning objectives. It's not good. A case which is a long one, when we set a traditional 7,000 words in length, typically can cover maximum 5 learning objectives, right? So that's kind of, otherwise it's already too diluted. If you can shoot with one case so many different objectives, then you don't dig sufficiently in depth. There are some comprehensive cases. I have written myself a case like that, very comprehensive. I wanted this case to actually replace my final exam, and it's a case I gave students to read several weeks ahead of time. It's really comprehensive, it's really big, but it's challenging, and that it's only done if you can give students take home exams where they need a lot of time. But those are not really typical and not the ones which are most common and successful that we're using in our classroom. Next slide, please. So we have a couple of more, I think, here, mistakes. The next one, right? Mismatch between teaching note and case, everything that I said. Learning objectives which are not tied up to the level, right? And then the case study which is submitted sometimes without pre-testing in the classroom. I told just rapidly before, ideally you should, and this is the best situation, you should pre-test that case before submitting for publication, for competition, because you already see some issues through this usage of the case in your class. Okay, so I think next slide, we have a couple of aspects to consider, and I'm kind of summarizing this some of the advice I would like to give. I'm mindful of time. So writing style, it's still professional. Yes, we have some casual language because but it's still professional. Way too unprofessional, obviously it's not something that, remember, we have a professional audience, students, that we need to really tame, let's say, our language in the way how we write that. Structure is very important. Sections, subsections, flow of ideas, the way how you organize the case, it's important. Consistency, not to be contradicting in some key information of the case. Quality of the language, obviously, grammar, sentences, enhancing elements, charts, tables are important, right, to support the decision making in the case. Next slide, please. A couple of elements more to consider here. Next slide, please. Okay, writing technique, very good. Okay, yeah, it's fine, it's fine. Some writing techniques, as I said, to make it catchy. Use catchy words, title, headings, select live list information quotes, something which is not boring, but it's interesting and representative. Paraphrasing, sometimes don't use just quotes, and it makes the case not interesting. Paraphrase some things, right? So it's the style of writing. Metaphorical way of writing, some proverbs sometimes to open a section if it's relevant, obviously. A catchy style of titles to make it. Use metaphors in your writing. Use some synonyms of the verbs that you are using, an adjective to illustrate, to make it like lively. Ask somebody else to read the case, right? And to say, what do you think? Maybe I need to change something. Okay, next, a couple of more advices there. Additional tip. Catchy, focus, I said topical, timely, right? I feel, but here I'm kind of summarizing it for you to get out of the session with some like specific advice. Use the case as an assignment in your course, because like that you can extract some interesting additional questions you can ask. You can ask students to write answers to the case and see what kind of interesting elements they can bring through that discussion. Connect the case with the teaching note. Remember, be as comprehensive as possible in your teaching note. Don't write a very short, because we need this information. Decision-driven cases are fundamental. Dilemma-driven cases are very interesting, and pretesting your case in the classroom to get feedback, right? So all this that I mentioned, just summarizing here. Let's move next. I think I just have a couple of things here then. So submission, what we need to submit. Case study document 1, teaching note 2, title page, which is there, the template available on the website, and then consent to publish. It's very important you obtain the consent to publish from your protagonist, from the company, so that they agree to the publication of the case. And then there are optional files. They will see if you're using some third-party material, you have to obtain the copyright permission from that. If you need additional tables, figures, and all this, then you can also append that. But the compulsory are the 4 files that we have here. Next, please. Title page, I wanted to just give you a template here so you can see how it looks like, but that's what you're going to find on the website for the submission. Next one here is consent to publish. It looks like that, right? You'll find it on the website too, and then you'll make your protagonist sign so that there are no issues at all and they agree to publication of your case. Okay, next. Submission tips, and I think I'm concluding with that. Okay, what kind of things, like which are tips for that? Check journal submission requirements, please, so that you can be sure that you're submitting what is required and you are avoiding back and forth. Follow submission requirements to the letter, please. Like every journal has its own, so it's very important to really follow those requirements to the letter. Pay attention to the formatting. We've seen using Times New Roman 12, and then you have other type of styles, and then 14, and then 15, and then it's all kind of messy. No, it has to look also nice, because that's something that will go in print, and it's important for reviewers when they review to see it consistently presented. Quality of language. I always tease my authors and I say, remember always, the entire case study has to be written in the past tense, right? So pay attention to detail, pay attention to grammar. Do not forget, we get this sometimes, to anonymize your submission, like in the teaching note, they forget to remove the names of the authors, because remember, we have a double blind peer review. So it's blind peer review, and it's important to anonymize the submission. And then it's very good to also get some feedback from your peers on before the submission, if you can. That always is beneficial, because it will allow you to improve already before submitting. Okay, next slide, please. I'm aware that I'll have submission website. So here, obviously, it's something that Melissa talked about. So let's move on. I have just this and the next slide, and I'm done. So what you need to do and what you need to avoid to conclude the session, to have a successful case study. Engaging writing style, not to bore the readers, as we said. Catchy focus for your case. Topical, and buzz, really something that is very recent. Dilemma-based, decision-driven case study. pretesting the case in the classroom. It's typically very, very highly advisable in order to get feedback. Connection between the case and the teaching note. Focus on the teaching note, not to make it too short and to put all the interesting, relevant information. And then dilemma, both, which appears both in the case opening and in the closure. And what not to do, next slide, what to avoid is never use the present tense or the future tense in the teaching case. This is always written, the teaching case, not the teaching note. The case itself is written always in the past tense, always. Even if, when you write about a country like Thailand was a country which, yes, you write it in the past. It seems weird, but that's how it is. It is actually done, and this is the convention of the pedagogical case study, for the reason that by the time you read it, it's already past, right? Do not write your case as a research article. I emphasize that. Do not focus on secondary data only. We do, but it's very difficult to publish a case which is focusing only on secondary data. We do publish, we do accept, but you will have to do a lot of work to write it in such a compelling way so that you give life to that specific case. So we do really encourage you to have primary data and then complement that with secondary data. Do not use outdated material, obviously, because it will not be relevant for the current situation. Do not ignore the important information in the teaching note. Do not write fictional cases. We'll never publish a fictitious or fictitious case. It has to be real case, real data, real information, real companies. But you can anonymize, let's say, disguise the case, because sometimes the issues are so tricky, and then the protagonist can agree to the publication with the condition that you disguise the case, change the name of the protagonist, change the name of the company, and all this to protect, because the issues are very tricky there, and sometimes there are a lot of challenges and problems, and people just don't want to, disclose this to the entire public to tell what exactly happens inside. But it has a lot of teaching benefit. And then do not focus on issues that are not worth solving. So cases which are already dated, cases that there are too many on them, that are used and overused, models that are already so overused that yet additional case study will not really add anything new to students and to faculty. And I think that this is, next slide, concluding my presentation with a few minutes that we have, but I wanted really to cover everything to make sure that I give constructive advice to everyone. Thank you. Melissa, over to you. If we have 1 minute, 2 minutes, I don't know.
Yeah, thank you, Virginia. That presentation was really excellent and really insightful and clear advice. We do have just a couple of minutes. So I will also say that we can answer questions offline as well. So if we have a bunch, I can always email these folks as well. There are quite a few in here. So rather than picking one at random, perhaps would be more useful to answer a popular question. So can I ask Virginia, for authors struggling to get consent from whatever organization they are working with, do you have any tips to get that signature?
Yes, I do have. So I always say from my experience, and I know because I do remember, dilemma-driven cases, and they're so intriguing, so amazing. And I do write cases on family businesses, and for obvious reasons, family don't want to say, oh, Virginia quarreled with her sister, and then after that, mom, and my name is there, and everybody knows all the intricacies of my family. So I know the dilemma of getting those people to sign. And what I do, I typically use a lot, and I go through a lot of cases with my students. Students first have a lot of connections. Sometimes they are the protagonists themselves. They are working their family business, they're working somewhere in another, they have some career issues. And then even, remember I said, the key thing is that if it's very dilemma driven, there are very sensitive issues there. Please disguise the case, but you still need their consent form, because like that we make sure it's a real case The only thing we've done, what? We changed the name of the company, we changed the name of people so that it's not easily identifiable, to protect the secret nature of people and the dilemmas that are going on in the company. So use your networks, use your students. Students are the best resource in that. And I would say even sometimes through research, when you give consulting to a company, I always keep like, oh, that would be interesting about that story, it's very interesting. So, and you develop a relationship. So use your network. That's the only way. People are the ones who create problems, but people are the ones who solve the problems. So the network is the key. From my experience, students are the best, right? Particularly in our region, in the Middle East, in Africa, they are the best because they know the tricks. They'll get to their fathers through the uncle, through this, say, we need that for the professor, for the classroom, for us to learn, and then you'll get that signature, believe me. So make sure you start from there, right? And then you'll get it. You make sure that you have that signature done. You can then move forward to write the case and submit.
Perfect. I think that's really true. So we are unfortunately at time now, but as I said, I will take the list of questions we didn't get to and I will email all the folks with an answer. It'll probably take a couple of days to do that. But thank you so much for your time, Virginia, and for sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you to Nadine also for helping with all our technical support and figuring out getting us started at the beginning. I would like to hand over to you, Virginia, for any closing sentiments you'd like to share.
Yes, I've seen we had a big crowd. We expect every single of you to submit a case. So we are very excited. Believe me, I'm a researcher myself, and believe me, doing this makes your life of a researcher, which sometimes becomes very boring, exciting and lively and interesting. So please blend this. If you can blend the researching thing and together with the teaching, really case study, writing, teaching case study, it makes your life really interesting. And it's a different type of skill that you train in yourself when you write that. So we really look forward to your submissions. Please do participate. Also, this vibe of competing, of doing in a constructive way, makes you learn a lot of things, right? And then it's so beneficial. And I'm looking forward to the submission, to reviewing them and publishing in our Emerald Emerging Marketing Case Study Collection. Good luck to everyone.
Yes, best of luck, especially if you do participate in the competition. Nadine, do you have any closing thoughts or a goodbye you'd like to share?
Yeah, I'd like to again apologize for the delay. I'm in Cairo right now, so we're facing a bit of internet problems for anyone joining us from Egypt. You know the struggle. And I do see that there are a lot of questions about the recordings and the certificate. So again, you will receive a follow-up email with the recording of the session and the attendance certificate to your registered email after 24 hours. And just thank you to everyone who's joining us, and thank you to Virginia, thank you to Melissa. And like Virginia said, we hope that we receive all of your submissions through this competition and make it famous, make it huge, and have a chance to win also a prize fund, which we aim to do to support the researchers, because we do realize and aware of the budget problems in a lot of institutions and researchers, and that's the aim of the competition. So yeah.
That's great. I think that's really well said. So with that, I think we can conclude today's session. I hope you have a great rest of your day, both of you. And good luck again to all the authors who joined us today.
Thank you.
Thank
all
you.
the best.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.